This is Popular Front, a podcast focused on the very niche and kind of geeky details of modern warfare with me, Jake Hanrahan. Today we're speaking to Ali Winston, a reporter at the New York Times. He's going to be speaking about a white nationalist militant street fighting group in the US that spread rapidly from 2017 to 2018 when they were all arrested and investigated by the domestic terrorism unit of the FBI. If you live in America, you might have heard of them, but generally outside there isn't a lot of information. So Ali's going to be speaking about how the Rise Above movement kind of led the way for this militant street activity of neo-fascists in America. If you like what we're doing at Popular Front and you want bonus content, go to patreon.com/popularfront. The full website has been launched now to popularfront.co. So Ali, tell us, what is the Rise Above movement? What is RAM?
So the Rise Above movement is a relatively small but, very well-known, at least now in the States, group of white nationalists, fascists, ultra-nationalists. There are a bunch of terms that can be used accurately to describe the group. They were started in about 2016 in Southern California in they spanned Los Angeles and Orange County and San Diego, which are three of the most populated counties in California. They were started by a guy called Rundo, a former gang member out of Queens, who moved west in 2014 or 15 to try and kind of restart his life with with the person he was seeing at the time. And they were formed about 2016, and they were kind of like an alt-right, far-right street fighting group. They started out as kind of a little bit of a lads boxing club, and then they trained in mixed martial arts. They had a kind of straight-edge image that they were pushing, and then as the whole left-right tension really swelled up in 2017, between anti-fascists and members of the far right, especially in California. That's where some of the most pronounced street fighting was up until Charlottesville that August. Rise Above, really, that's where they cut their teeth and got their name, by brawling with black-clad anti-fascists in Huntington Beach, Berkeley, San Bernardino, and then they went out to Charlottesville and were among the most prominent combatants out there. So that's really where they caught public rec. And Berkeley, for example, in Huntington Beach, they would wear these like all gray active wear, tracksuit style outfits with the half skull masks that you and I both know Adam Waffen and other far right folks love to wear. And they were about it. They trained in mixed martial arts. They would do weekly trainings, cardio, combat, weights, and they actually fought quite well in groups. They fought in teams. They covered each other's backs. They were never alone. You could see that they knew how to grapple, they knew how to fight in a situation that, frankly, in those brawls, there were a lot of people just throwing fists wildly and just kind of, mucking around. And that's why they stood out to me. The first time I saw them in Berkeley back in April of 2017, they really caught my attention.
Yeah, same. When I first saw the footage of Ram, it was very clear, like, these lads actually know how to fist fight. They weren't just a bunch of fash running around. Like, they had tactics. You could tell they had their hands wrapped. You could tell they'd done combat sports. They were properly learning how to fight. And I hadn't seen a group like that before, I mean, is there anyone else out there like Ram?
There are organizations like them out there that are still going pretty strong. A group called Patriot Front, which is a spin-off of Vanguard America. They also engage in this sort of heavy mixed martial arts training. But there are other organizations out there that were doing something similar. There's a similar group up in Quebec. I think they're called Atalante, something of that sort. And then there are other gyms, white supremacist gyms in the Rust Belt in the Midwest where the combatants, there were people who participate in their trainings actually do work on combat technique and something of that sort. But I do believe that Rise Above were certainly one of the groups that got the most attention, in part because they worked very closely with people in the alt-right media sphere, like Vincent Fox James of the Red Elephants. They're really close to Mike Painovich Mike Enoch of the Right Stuff, Eric Stryker. So they definitely had signal boosters who pushed their image out there, and their videos were also very well produced, done in a way to appeal to young adolescent Americans who really were the target audience for them. They were looking to recruit young conservative Americans who felt like they were being targeted for their political views by, the far left, the radical left, Antifa, whoever.
Right, let's talk about the leader of RAM, Rob Rundo. He's got a very interesting history, hasn't he? And I think without him, I don't think they would have had the mobility that they had. He kind of was the ringleader, right?
Yeah, Rob is his whole life. Rob has been the sort of guy that people organize around. He's a good recruiter. He's charismatic, and I'm making reference to interviews I've done with people who knew him in his current and past life. He's a very competent, capable, intelligent individual. So Rob started Rob was an adolescent in Queens when he first got involved in, street politics. He joined or started, depending on who you talk to, a neighborhood gang called the Original Flushing Crew, which is in his part of Queens, northeastern Queens. And they were like a neighborhood gang that, would, hang out.
And this was a gang with all different races, right? It wasn't a white supremacist gang.
Oh, yeah. No, it was not at all. The neighborhood's incredibly mixed up, and that group was mixed up. A lot of them were Latino, There were Jews in that group of friends, or that street gang, whatever you want to call it. And realistically, that's not an uncommon thing in New York City. Like, every neighborhood will have a group of kids, a group of knuckleheads that hang out together and call themselves something and give themselves a little hand sign. You have that in some of the wealthier neighborhoods. You have that in the poorer neighborhoods. It's city living. But OFC were there's two parts of that neighborhood. One is on one side of Northern Boulevard. It's north towards Long Island Sound. And the other part is further south, and that's the nicer side where Rob lived at that point, although it's not great by any means. The other side is south on the other side of Northern Boulevard, and that's more, close quarter apartment buildings, single family houses. They're a little bit more run down, and that area is or was back then heavily Central American. And there was a set of MS-13 Mara Salvatrucha down there, Guanacos, little psychos that would beef with Rob's people and Rob, and they got into, they had a running street battle with these guys for years in the mid 2000s, and it was, Rob and his friends would jump these guys with baseball bats. Some of these guys would take shots at their other friends, and it was serious. And in 2009, Rob and two of his other OFC members caught one of these guys on the street.
An MS-13 guy.
Yeah, it chased him. The guy flashed a hand sign at them, his gang sign. He chased him down the street, and Rob pulls out a fixed blade knife and stabs the guy multiple times. Really messed him up, gave him a colostomy bag. And the video of that stabbing is pretty nasty, man. Yeah, it's really nasty.
Yeah, it's really nasty. I've seen it. He basically doesn't care if he kills the guy, right? He stabs him in the back, he stabs him in the ribs, like he just doesn't care.
Yeah, he was really, working the kid over. And someone described afterwards that, they saw Rob afterwards and he had blood. Basically, he had blood on his eyeball. Like, there's blood everywhere. He really went for it. So he was arrested for that crime, charged, convicted, and sentenced to prison. He got out, I believe, in 2011. When he was inside, he actually got involved in prison politics and started up a little white supremacist or whites-only group there called the 88ers. Told his friends when he came out that he'd done some dirt inside and never been able to confirm that, but that was the word on him. And then when he came out, he tried to go straight, worked construction, worked, as he did manual labor, blue-collar labor, got a union job, did pretty well. Stayed away from the gang life, yeah, he did.
And do we know how Rundo became this white supremacist? Like, did he have that ideology before, or was it a case of, go to jail, join a white gang?
So I've been told that before he went in, he would hang out. He knew about that culture beforehand. He would play Screwdriver songs to his friends.
So he's with all these like gangbangers of different races, but listening to racist music with them.
Oh yeah, and they would all like smoke weed and joke about it and sing along to it. You know, they would sing along to Romper Stomper Skinhead, and he would talk about wanting to get his red laces. I mean, there were signs that he knew. What his friends told me is that they didn't take it seriously at the time, but now, once they realized that Rob had gone on this, 1488, or when you're a skinhead, you get your red laces when you when you attack someone of another race, and you seriously hurt them or kill them, and that's what Rob was talking about. Jokingly at the time, but then he went out and did something that probably would have given him his red laces. So before he goes upstate to serve his bid, he gets 2 tattoos. He gets a Totenkopf on the back of his neck, and he gets a Victory of Valhalla tat across the back of his shoulders. And those you can still see today. He still has them. He also had an OFC tattoo on the backside of one of his arms, near one of his triceps.
And for anyone that doesn't know, the Totenkopf was the insignia of Hitler's SS.
Yeah, death's head. It's the death's head. And he got these tattoos. It's not clear whether he got them because he wanted to fit in or because he had this ideology, but he got this ink before going into prison, serving his bid, and then he went into prison and got involved in whatever sort of version of, prison politics you could in New York State, which is not like California. There's not a huge white supremacist population or a white population in the state system. But when he comes out, so he and his lady in, I think, 2014 or 15, I'm not sure when precisely, but they leave New York for work. They move to California, to Southern California, and down there he finds more union work, I believe, sheet metal. Works at a sheet metal union, and he got involved somehow with individuals who were of a similar ilk, had similar ideological persuasions to him. Right? There's people have told me that he was reading literature. He was reading far-right literature. There were signs that they didn't realize at the time, but now they knew, in retrospect, that he had developed his ideology in one way or another. But in 2016, he meets a couple people. One of them, I believe, is Ben Daly, who is another founding member of the Rise Above movement from Southern California, Hermosa Beach. Did jail time for firearms possession, and they, click up and form the Rise Above movement. And now, looking back on it, it's clear that he was also involved with some members of the Hammerskins as well, and they were involved in the founding of that group. And the Hammerskins are the largest skinhead gang in the country. They've been responsible for a number of homicides. They have chapters overseas as well, in Germany, Portugal, Italy, Spain. They're out there. They're in Europe as well. So they start recruiting among Daly's friend group and social circles in Southern California, in Torrance, in Hermosa Beach, some members of the Hammerskins who were previously documented by other members of law enforcement and anti-fascists also participate in the early trainings. And they call themselves the DIY division, the do-it-yourself division, right?
That was the name in the beginning.
Yeah, and they didn't really have much of a presence except for on social media until the March 2017 rally, the Make America Great March in Huntington Beach, California. Huntington Beach is one of the last blue-collar cities, increasingly less so, but it's one of the last blue-collar cities in Orange County, which is to the south of Los Angeles County. Historically very conservative, like rock-ribbed Reagan Republican conservative. Long history of white supremacist groups operating in Orange County, especially traditional skinhead gangs. That's something any law enforcement official in California will tell you. It's very well documented. Volumes have been written about it. But at this march, you have a bunch of Trump supporters come out and they march around and march for their free speech and in opposition to the disruption of Milo Yiannopoulos' talk at Berkeley, up at UC Berkeley in Northern California in, I believe, February of that year. And there are some, predictably, there are some counter-protesters there. all black, so forth. And, pushing and shoving breaks out with them. And then one member of Rise Above, a guy named Tyler Laub, who prior to this had a robbery conviction and actually was on probation at the time of this entire incident. Tyler grabs one of these journalists who's trying to get in between the members of Rise Above and the other far-right folks, other MAGA folks, and the anti-fascists, because they're starting to push and shove and really get into it. And he throws a bunch of punches at this dude and touches off a huge melee in which, other members of Rise Above get involved, and Rob Rundo famously grabs one of these black-dressed and black-clad anti-fascists, throws him to the sand, and pounds on him until whoever it is fires a bunch of mace at him and manages to get free. And the image of Rob throwing blows at this black-clad anti-fascist on the ground becomes a meme.
Yeah, it's weird footage. They look like surfer dudes or something, and then you realise, like, oh no, fascists.
Yeah, surf Nazis. So Rob pummeling this guy. A picture of him like throwing a punch with his teeth gritted. He becomes he gets circulated on the internet as Based Elbow Man, and no one knew who his name was at the time. Then in April of 2017, there's a rally hosted the far right groups and anti-Antifa folks, self-identified like Base Stickman and all these other these Proud Boys from the area, a whole kind of panoply of the right and far right in California gather in downtown Berkeley to protest against the radical left, the far left, California, Berkeley, California. And of course, this being the Bay Area and the East Bay in particular, which is a pretty lefty area, and there's a lot of, very militant anarchists, anti-fascists, communists. There's a lot of folks on the left who are willing to throw down. They get into it. There's a battle royale essentially in downtown Berkeley, and RAM, who are now calling themselves the Rise Above movement, hit the headlines. I mean, they are dressed in this all gray outfit. There are about 7 of them. There were several of them up there for that rally. They were actually fighting alongside Identity Europa's Nathan D'Amico, and they really they made a name for themselves right there, because they fought together and really just they were the most aggressive group. They were the first ones over the police lines to attack the lefties.
That's what I was going to say. When I remember watching the footage of it, and fuck them. They're white nationalists, fascists, whatever. But they're definitely very well organized in terms of how to fight in a street battle. Like, you're watching that, and they just roll over everybody. You know what I mean? Like, bam, bam, guy comes in the left. They've trained to fight. Yeah, exactly. Like, but to street fight, right? Like, that was what really surprised me. Because normally it's like some fat fucking racist just windmilling,
No, they'd been training for that moment. They, in the texts and communications that have come out since, that they were sending to each other, they'd made it clear that they had a game plan, that they were going to be ready to throw down in Northern California.
And where were they training? Did they have their own gyms or what? Are they just gathering in the neighborhood, or?
They would mix it up. There were some mixed martial arts gyms they would train at. They trained at a bunch of parks in Orange County, I think a couple in San Diego as well. But they changed their training location pretty frequently. I went to one of their training the parks that they trained at. It's weird. It's this new park in a brand spanking new subdivision, Marblehead Park in Orange County, up the hill in San Clemente, up from the beach. And it's like, there's like a little middle school right behind it. It's the last place you'd expect, a bunch of white nationalists to be training for the race war, their Gottdammerung with Antifa.
Well, let's talk about the RAM or RAM. Let's talk about their ideology. Like, I know they're white nationalists, but what do they actually want? What do they think they're doing? Like, do they have a long-term plan, or they just want to smash the left, as it were?
I mean, they definitely wanted to smash the commies. But they were very, very, very into the writing of Giulio Evola, who is a very prominent Italian fascist.
Tolkien for fascists.
Well, yeah, Tolkien for fascists. I mean, it's Evola's writings were, they're not quite esoteric Hitlerism, but really, deep ideology of, very, very foundational fascist ideology. And he did believe, some of his beliefs were pretty out there, and they would read him, they would read Alain de Benoist. They were immersing themselves in a true fascist canon in terms of the literature they read. They did believe in taking care of whites, and they did believe in, training their own people to rid themselves of drugs and alcohol and stop, submitting themselves to this, Zionist, globalist conspiracy that was corrupting white youth of today. I mean, it is that strain of white nationalism that, our problems are being foisted on us from the outside by this controlling Zionist occupied government, which is actually a pretty old white power trope in the U.S.
Right, I read a thing where one of these groups was saying that the opioid crisis, which is absolutely horrific and should be spoken about way more than it is, I think, in the US, but they were saying that the opioid crisis, they were like, it's the Jews, they've got us all hooked on the opioids. Like, okay, but like, you know what I mean? They really believe that, right? That everything bad that happens to white people is because of Jews.
I mean, Zog played such a heavy role in the social media posts and some of the chats they had, the propaganda that they would circulate. Ben Daly in particular, I mean, his background, his online presence was full of references to the Zog and Israel and Soros. Really toxic material. But I do believe that a good amount of the ideology that they received, it's not clear who the individual was who kind of directed their study, but I do believe that the Hammerskins they associated with had a good amount of influence on what they read. I also think that Rob may have come across a lot of this on his own. He's a very smart individual, and when he commits to something, he really does commit to it. The Hammerskins absolutely helped them train, though. There was one guy, Robert Smithson, who I believe is still at large, hasn't been arrested yet, and may not be in the country. But they helped them hone their training regimen. There was a mixed martial arts fighter named Hooper. God, his first name is eluding me right now. But he was also one of the individuals who helped them train. The guy who fought professional bouts, pretty big lad. Logan Hooper, that's his name. So yeah, I mean, they really got out there. They would travel to events. They would commit. They went to Charlottesville. They planned the logistics to bring a couple guys out to Charlottesville. And in Charlottesville, they were Ben Daly, Tom Gillen, Mike Masellis, and this guy, Cole White from the Bay Area, who they recruited to bring out with them, really got involved in the mayhem. And then after Charlottesville, they kind of pulled back a little bit from the public eye. They didn't want to do as much public organizing. They trained up their cadre. They had a rotating cast of about 50 people. I believe it shrank in time. But then in April of last year, 2018, Rob Rundo, Mike Masellis, Ben Daly, and this guy named Robert Smithson all traveled to Europe to go to this NPD-sponsored mixed martial arts tournament, on Hitler's birthday in Ostritz in East Germany, where Rob and Robert Smithson compete. And, there's just a bunch of Sig Heiling knots. These individuals are like the classic beer gut, skinhead types. But there are also people among them who train in mixed martial arts, and that's why they're there to have their pure race tournament. This tournament was also sponsored by Dennis Nikitin, the founder of White Rex, which is an organization of particular interest. They are what would you characterize White Rex as, Jake? They're Russian? Are they Ukrainian? Are they German?
I think they're like pan-Eastern European, to be honest. I've seen all sorts of different people, but generally they speak Russian, yeah.
Yeah. So it's this mixed martial arts promotion company, and they have a pretty good public relations interface. Nikitin of himself is pretty interesting. I believe his background, he's person reporting Der Spiegel did. He's actually Jewish. Go figure.
Fuck. Well, I mean, the guy that funds Azov battalion is also allegedly Jewish, so who the fuck knows what's going on in them parts?
Yeah. So Nikitin, he started off in FC Köln's hooligan firm, and I believe he moves to Russia and gets involved with CSKA Moscow's hooligan firm, and then moves his way ideologically into like more right wing political organizing and street combat. And then White Rex organizes these tournaments all throughout Europe, in France, in Germany, certainly in Ukraine, which actually was the next stop on their little Euro trip. They went to Kiev, and Rob definitely fought in a tournament at an Azov-sponsored club called Reconquista. And then after that, they go to Italy and click up with Casa Pound, the Italian fascist group. So they made this kind of little circuit of Europe with the intent of making, and they made contact with the most prominent far-right organizations of their kind, of their like kind of grassroots, street culture, street level type organizing that existed in Europe. So that really makes that, to me, that made them stand out from the rest of the far right ecosystem in the U.S.
Yeah, definitely. We spoke about this before, but when I saw one of the training videos, very kind of slick production that Ram had put together, it did feel more like European fash stuff, like we have a very specific aesthetic here, which is very different to the American far right, and our leftists as well, like our far left look not as weak as your guys. Like they have more of a tough kind of street style, you know what I'm saying? And I feel like, definitely when I looked at Ram, I thought, fuck man, they've really taken that from Europe. And it's interesting to hear they've gone on this kind of fascist MMA tour of Europe, they really wanted to build connections.
Yeah, and Rob had actually, per some chats that got leaked by, that got put out there by Unicorn Riot, he was actually in the Identity Europa chats. He bragged about visiting Europe beforehand in 2017 and about making contact with similar groups in Ukraine, in Italy beforehand. And he was very well versed in it. He would regularly post videos in those chats from far right groups in Spain. What is it, Vox? Yeah, he would post stuff from Poland. He would, make constant reference back to the European far right. And, his connection with Nikitin was strong enough that once they came back stateside, Rise Above started selling White Rex branded clothing through their online store, Right brand clothing, where they sold like Rise Above related gear. So they were definitely making moves.
So they'd basically connected over the space of about 3 or 4 years. They've connected these various fascist groups through Europe up to themselves. They've gone on this kind of European tour. They're selling equipment. They've been fighting in the streets. They've a lot of video of them punching people's heads in. To be honest, then what happened? Because they've kind of vanished, right?
Well, so what? They really did skirt any sort of culpability for a long time. The only one of them that had been...
Why?
I can't honestly answer that. Rob Rundo was arrested in Berkeley for decking a cop in the middle of this melee, and the DA, in April 2017, DA declined to press charges. God knows why. I mean, this is Alameda County. You'd wonder why the DA would want to let somebody walk for assaulting a cop. In 2008, that's when a lot of the reporting that I was doing with ProPublica was really hitting. We put out information about the group. We identified one of these guys, Mike Miselis, as being working for a defense contractor with Northrop Grumman, as an aerospace engineer. He had a security clearance, was a PhD candidate at UCLA. They were making their trips to Europe, but there were signs that they were getting more attention. And then in, I believe, August, Ben Daly, Tom Gillen, who else got arrested? Cole White and Mike Miselis are all arrested by the feds and charged with conspiracy to riot and riot. A few months later, similar charges drop against Rob Rundo, Robert Bowman, Tyler Laub, and Aaron Eason for riot and conspiracy to riot, this time out of a federal court in California and Los Angeles. So they're facing two sets. There are two indictments, one out of Western Virginia, one out of Western District of Virginia, one out of Central District of California, alleging conspiracy charges against 8 members of Rise Above. Rob, actually, story of his arrest is kind of interesting. So he flew to Europe in, I believe, October of 2018. He was going to meet up with Robert Smithson in Europe to do some more training. I believe Smithson was already in Ukraine at the time. And you had some event planned with the far righters, with Nikitin's folks or related people.
And sorry, just to back up a sec, whenever they were going to Ukraine, they're meeting up with Azov every time. Is that right? Like this, the far right battalion out there who also do a lot of these MMA events.
Oh yeah, and Azov claimed them. Azov did praise Rise Above when asked about them. They said, yeah, these were the guys these were people who were holding down the right ideology. They were really putting their money where their mouth was, So they were walking the walk. And Rob flies to Europe. He gets bounced back from Europe, comes back to the States, understands that something is wrong. Mike Masellis, Rob, Ben Daly had all been questioned coming back into the country in, I believe, May. They'd been pulled aside for secondary screening, and that you can see in court documents. Rob is in SoCal. He's back in Huntington Beach at his apartment, and he gets spooked, and he bugs. I think he understood that something was about to happen to him, and he realized he couldn't get into Europe. He''d been turned back on a flight at a transfer point, and he walks across the border to Mexico and keeps going. He gets on a flight to Cuba. I don't know where he was trying to go. He went to Cuba. And I don't know where he went after that, but he was finally apprehended in El Salvador, of all places. He gets extradited back to Los Angeles. He gets sent back to Los Angeles and arrested at the airport.
He went to Cuba?
Yeah. Rob engaged in a bit of a reverse migration.
Ironic.
He was following the opposite path of all the migrants fleeing to the U.S., who he and his group, routinely demonized and vilified. I mean, you should hear him talk about MS-13, about how basically Central America is putting these all these gang members and criminals in the country. I mean, they do banner drops over freeways in Southern California saying, secure borders, secure borders, secure America. That they were the anti-immigration trope and the anti-Islamic tropes that they would push out there. And talking to former recruits of theirs, really were drawing points. They were kind of seen as, they were not drawing points, but they were seen as like acceptable positions to hold, especially in Southern California. Some of the recruits started getting turned off when people like Daly would start to espouse anti-Jewish tropes. And that was a bit of a sign for some people that, hey, maybe this isn't for me, But there were signs when these arrests were effected that Rise Above was going in a different direction. There was a significant amount of ammunition found at Mike Masellis' home in Lawndale. We know he had firearms. We don't know where they are. And there is pretty good evidence on social media from people I've talked to that Rise Above also went out there in the desert in Southern California and engaged in firearms training. And that was where they were looking to take things. Yeah, so they were definitely moving in a different direction when they got brought in by the feds. And since then, there's been a little bit of a defense campaign mounted again for them by folks like Eric Stryker and some other far righters who control their old Gab account. But they're right now looking at trials, I believe, in July for each group of the folks who've been indicted, and 2 of them have actually pled out and have agreed to cooperate with the authorities.
Not Rob, though, I bet.
No, not Rob. Rob's actually on record. He's posted a couple videos online, phone calls with him and Eric Stryker and Mike Painovich, one of those two. And he's, derided the reporting we've done on them and, said, no, this is persecution. They're persecuting us. This is what happens when you're, right-thinking, right man.
Yeah, but that's the thing. No one is saying you can't have right-wing thoughts. That's fine. Like, if you want to be right-wing, that's fine. These guys are far right. This is very different to just being a bit right-wing. No one is saying you can't have a negative view of immigration. That's up to you. But these guys are white nationalists going about punching people in the face and training to be able to combat people in the streets, Like, how can they think that's persecution? It doesn't make sense to me. Like, I've seen your reporting on this. You're the guy that added up the dots, but they were already out there. It wasn't like you did some particularly secret stuff. It was already there, right?
No, it was already out there. And there was, the best reporting on this up until we started diving into it in August. That I started diving into it with my friend Darwin Bond Graham. And then we started working with AC Thompson at ProPublica after we published our initial piece on their activities in Berkeley. But there was good research out there by a group of anti-fascists, by Northern California Northern California Anti-Racist Action, NORCARA. And they did the social media scrape on these guys. They actually paid attention to who they were and worked back on it. It was known. Any law enforcement agency could have picked that up and done the work on it. The next step that we did for our reporting that came out in October of 2017 was to look at their criminal histories and understand better who these people were and where they come from, and also look at the ideology that they were espousing.
And what kind of criminal histories did they have?
Oh, they had felonies, man. Every one of them had felonies. Every one of them had felonies. Rob had done his prison time for his assault, his gang assault. Ben Daly had this gun conviction. Tyler Laub had a robbery conviction. Rob Bowman had done prison time in California for robbery. Matt Brandstetter, this hammerskin, actually served prison time for beating the tar out of this Jewish kid in Orange County. It was a hate crime. He was actually convicted of a hate crime and sent into California State Prison for that. Every single one of them that we looked at in that piece, they had felonies, man. This isn't casual. When we looked at them at first, started reporting on it, I said, oh, these guys, they look like some kind of surf bros in SoCal. They're probably some South Bay cats who just got involved in this stuff because they thought it was fun to punk lefties. No, every single one of them had a record. Every single one.
That's what's really interesting to me, because when you look at a lot of these neo-fascist kids, especially in the new wave in the US, most of them are like Pol retards, or they're saying day of the rope. It's like, really, the only person you're going to hang is yourself. Like they're like skinny basement lunatics, usually. Like Atomov and got their guns and that, but they're fucking losers, really, But Ram, like you said, these are hard guys. These are like gritty street kids, basically.
Yeah, and the people who they were associating with and training with and learning from were competent at what they did. They were competent at violence. They were steeped in this white nationalist ideology, this white supremacist ideology that the Hammerskins are unabashedly espousing, and they were moving in a direction towards people like Nikitin, towards the Casa Pound, towards Azov. I mean, these are not benign organizations. They're overt neo-fascist organizations that have a bigoted, very Manichaean worldview. It's black and white to them. It's us and them.
This is why I'm really glad we spoke about this, because here in Europe, all we really see from you guys in the US, if you don't, obviously not me, because I'm a kind of anorak and I dig into it, but it's like MAGA kid smirks. It's like, man, at the same time, you've got these street fighting crews made up of former criminals. Like it's a mad situation.
Yeah, it's, in a way, this is what Ram to me is a modern spin-off of the old skinhead crews. No braces, no boots, hair, they grow out their hair. Some of them have that little fashy haircut. They fit in, they have a more all-American look. They have a more cutting-edge look. And frankly, they were able to draw attention. They have a following. They have cachet. And I do believe that there are other groups out there like them, like Patriot Front, that are definitely down to engage in some of the same violence. Patriot Front are also very happy to intimidate journalists. The U.S. has these strains of white nationalist violence that you really, and ideology and organization that are there for the taking if you look for it. If you pay attention to what people are saying, if you pay attention to what these groups are doing. And the problem is there are accepted strains of bigotry in society. Islamophobia is accepted. Anti-immigrant sentiment is accepted in large strains of our society. You see this in the stuff that gets put in the commercial media. And these groups recruit off that base, off that common base of interest and of hatred.
And I also think Ram were quite smart. I watched one of their videos, you and me spoke about it, and you disagreed with me, but I said it looks cool. If I didn't know these guys were fascists, I'd be all in for it, because they're doing combat training, which is very good for your body, good for your mind, good for personal self-defense. They're straight edge, so no drugs, no alcohol, no smoking, which is again a very good thing. So as a young lost kid, I would think, yeah, that's okay. And then unfortunately, they want to kill Jews and beat up Antifa and whatever. You know what I mean?
Yeah, I mean, they had an appeal. They, and yes, I did disagree with you at the time, but it is true. They marketed themselves very well, and they were doing it in a way that is authentic, that appears to not be, it's not some guy like Richard Spencer trying to dress like he's in the Ivy League and sip whiskey and talk, high level theory. They're talking about, hey, look, we know that some of your friends we know you may have had problems with drugs. We did too. We had problems with alcohol. We had problems growing up. We had these things that were pushing us back and knocking us down. But here's why this happened to you. It's not because it's you fucking up. It's not because it's you messing up. It's somebody else pushing this stuff down on you, downhill. And it's coming from the Zog. It's coming from X. It's coming from Y. And, they are organizations, far-right organizations in the U.S. have made a concerted effort to recruit youth. And this is one of the organizations, Rise Above is one of the organizations that actually had a good amount of success in recruiting a cadre and building an image of themselves around something that's holistic and positive, not a negative view, right? Not a negative view of the world. That is the second layer of this organization when you get into it. But the way they sold themselves was, yes, we're about us. We're about our guys. We want to do things right for our guys. Why? You guys can have your own organizations. There's pro-black, pro-Latino, pro-Jew, pro-Native American. What about us?
Yeah, it goes into all this racism and violence and whatever. Do you think that's the end of them now that they're all basically in prison? Or do you think, they'll get off and start again?
It's hard to tell. There are people in this organization who are still at large. There are people in the adjacent organizations to them, like the Hammerskins, that are still at large. And I think their trial will be interesting. It'll be a bit of a watershed moment in terms. This is the only group to catch a conspiracy charge out of Charlottesville. This and all the riots that happened in California. This is the only group to actually be targeted properly, or not properly, but to be targeted as a cluster by federal law enforcement. There are smaller organizations that they've picked up, but for example, Adamov, and there were never any charges filed against them as a group, just as individuals, right? Sam Woodward, Nick Giampa, Brendan Russell, Devin Arthurs. Nothing like this has come down on Vanguard America. Nothing like this has come down on Patriot Front. Nothing like this has come down on Identity Europa.
So why RAM? Why did the police go after them this way?
They were high visibility, and there was a lot of attention focused on them. Don't want to say because of our reporting, but they put their name out there. They also had this visual affect too. When there was so much tape of them fighting and brawling, doing it very effectively. I think that scared a lot of people. I also think that realistically, looking at the filings that have been made in the past few months, the federal government, first of all, the domestic terrorism squad investigated them. It wasn't a criminal investigation. It was done by that particular group, the FBI. That's what the affidavits say. And then when you look at the current filings that DOJ is making against them, they're outlining their ties to Azov, to Casa Pound. They're outlining their ties to neo-Nazi organizations in Europe. And I think that's something that the government paid attention to. Once they started seeing that connectivity to international far-right fascist groups, that's what really perked their interest up.
Yeah, and I think people really need to wake up to that. You and me know, because we were looking through yeah, it's huge, right? We were looking at the Atomwaffen stuff when we did our investigation with AC, and fucking Brandon Russell, who started Atomwaffen, he met members of National Action before they were even on the terror list. So you're looking at 2015. It's a big deal.
Yeah, they definitely made that connectivity. There are other organizations, Identity Europa, really pull from Génération Identitaire. They're very, very, very into that entire European identitarian construct, that model of organizing. Casa Pound, again, they aped them. They aped their organization structure. AFD has a lot of big American fans. That connectivity, and then you have guys like Kevin McDonald, this far-right ideologue, going and speaking at I believe, an Azov-sponsored conference in Kiev. There is this back and forth over there that really must be paid attention to. You have members of the Front National speaking at at CPAC, the conservative, the annual conservative version of Lollapalooza, really.
The most unfun Lollapalooza ever.
If that's your thing, that's your thing. But, I'm not a politics reporter. I couldn't care about that stuff. But you see this connectivity, you see this ideological movement back on both sides of the Atlantic, and it really warrants attention. Again, in this country, of all the terrorist attacks perpetuated in this country last year, all the murders, the domestic terrorism-related murders, were all committed by members of the far right, and not one member of the far left committed them in 2018. It sounds like there's going to be a hearing in the House of Representatives about far-right extremism, about white nationalist extremism, and I think that there's a little bit of more of a realization now about the threat posed by this current wave we're seeing. This is what happened in Christchurch last week. The suspect in that case, the main suspect, the alleged gunman, he was very, very, very much a self-identified fascist who placed himself in this pantheon of homicidal far-right figures like Darren Osborne, like Anders Breivik, like Dylan Roof. And that's where he situated himself. He's wearing the Kolvrat, he's wearing the Celtic Cross, he's wearing the Sonnenrand on his gear. His rifle is, slathered in these, daubed on white supremacist slogans. There's no question in my mind that Brandon Tarrant was not a internet troll, that he was a white nationalist. He was a homicidal white nationalist who had it in his mind to kill these people because of his ideology.
Yeah, of course he was. He just was very online, that's all. Like, he, some of his manifesto, a lot of it was trolling, but that was just like a little dog whistle and a nod to his little boys on 8chan who would go, oh, that's fucking hilarious, and reporters that would misreport it. That doesn't mean he wasn't, I see some right-wing guys like, he said he didn't mind gays. He said he liked Anders Breivik. Like, what the fuck is wrong with you? Like, it's very clear what he was doing.
What I will say about Breivik, the Breivik connection, is this. You have another individual in the U.S., Christopher Hasson, this Coast Guard lieutenant, who was arrested and charged last month in February by the feds. The complaint against him, the court documents show that he was another one of these acolytes of Breivik, had read the manifesto and was planning a Breivik-style attack in the U.S. So what happened in Christchurch very well could have happened in Virginia or Maryland or D.C. or anywhere on the eastern seaboard with this guy if he hadn't been brought in. So this spread of this white nationalist ideology, of which Breivik certainly was a proponent, despite all his well-documented mental illnesses and whatever sort of level he was on the scale, the man put forth a blueprint that people are following.
I never buy that thing as well of like, Anders Breivik was on the spectrum. Like, I've got a friend who's autistic. He's fine, and he could very easily become whatever he wanted to. Just because he has this illness doesn't mean that he isn't responsible for what he did.
Yeah, and especially, in this country, it's so easy to get a firearm in this country.
Yeah.
It's so easy to get a semi-automatic firearm. In New York City, where I am, it's not that easy, but you can drive you a few hours south of here, a few hours to the west, and the laws in those states are very different, let alone the West Coast or the South.
Well, lucky you, we can't even have a fucking bread knife without a license.
Well, there's a reason why people got out of England so long ago, Jay.
All right, Ali, that was excellent, man. So, Ali, if people want to follow your work and get in touch with you, where can they do that?
So I work at the New York Times. I'm a reporter on the Metro desk. I cover the New York City Police Department, so you can read my stuff at the Times. I'm on Twitter. A Winston is my handle, and that's what I do. Most of the time I work on city-related policing issues and criminal justice stuff, but every now and then I break off and do stuff like this.
Okay, man. Thank you very much. That was really good.
Not a problem, Jake.
That was Ali Winston talking about the Rise Above movement, a white nationalist street fighting movement in the US. Sorry about the audio at the end there. We lost like the last 10 minutes of the recording, so I had to bring it up from the audio on my mic, so it sounds a bit ratty, but it's alright, it's just the end. If you like what we're doing here at Popular Front, please do consider supporting us on the Patreon. It's the only real way we grow. That is patreon.com/popularfront. Also now the Popular Front website is up and running. We have all sorts on there, articles, video, the shop. So go to www.popularfront.co. This episode was sponsored by the defensepost.com, defense with an S. Follow them for regular updates on the world in conflict. Subscribe to us on YouTube. Go to youtube.com/popularfront. Instagram is instagram.com/popular.front. And for Twitter, either follow me, that's at Jake_Hanrahan, HANRAHAN, or go to the Popular Front Twitter, that's twitter.com/popularfrontco. Thank you very much to the following people. Without this wouldn't be possible. They are Adam Berg-Snyder, Axel Iverson, Chad Walker, Dan Dunham, Daniel Shearer, Darby, Diana Gorvanek, Elizabeth Banicki, Emily Molly, Fletcher Tate, James from the Discord, Joanne Stocker, Joel Tambusi, Jack Mayhoff, Lawrence Abrahams, LH, Margaret Bowling, thank you very much, absolutely sorted me out this month when the laptops and everything went down, Michael Euler, Patrick Bronte, Peter McCormack from the What Bitcoin Did podcast, Russia Alakidi, Ryan Sandercock, Scott Jonesy, Sebastian from the Discord, Surushe Hawazi, Teddy, Tom Lochrin, Tony Bin, Vida Provost, and Zachary Hinch. Thank you very much. And if I missed your name off, please do let me know. Patreon is an absolutely dreadful, buggy platform. And for some reason, sometimes it doesn't tell me all the higher tier people. I don't know why. So get in contact if I missed your name off. And if I did, apologies. Music in this episode, the intro was by Home. And the outro was by Son of Old. It's a remix of an old Kino song. Follow him, soundcloud.com/son-of-old. Like I said, the Popular Front website is fully operational now. Go to popularfront.co. Peace.